This is PanzerBlitz Situation 5, the impossible one, the one that clearly cannot work, the one that was never play-tested. It's not just that the Germans can't win, about half the scenarios are like that. It's physically absurd. This is a deep dive into the guts of this scenario, so if you're looking for hardcore analysis, you've come to the right place. If you're looking for carnage, you won't find any of that in this video. First of all, we consider the victory conditions. They are a bit complicated, but here's the translations. The Germans attacked the Soviet line. After breaking through, some fraction of their force, which I am calling the payload, moves further, i.e. off map, to do something else, stays off map for 3 turns, then returns, moves back through the Soviet line, and leaves the map again on the German side. German victory is determined by the part of the payload that completes the entire trip. So, Soviet line is going to be somewhere here. The German force starts somewhere here, actually closer in, travels through the Soviet line to the far side of the board, which is the east side, stays off while the remaining forces still do something over here. Then the payload comes back through here, all the way back across the entire board, and gets off over here. That is the essence of it. Now I'm going to zoom in, because this is a better, well, maybe there. So let's look at the forces. The Germans have a good mech battalion, and that is about 6 or 8 armored fighting vehicles, platoon of infantry, bunch of half-tracks, and some other things. And the Soviets have a stack of infantry and some good artillery and a couple tanks and some trucks and things, plus stacks of positional defenses. So the Soviets have a reinforced rifle regiment plus substantial obstacles. It's important to recognize that the Soviet force is slow, but not static. Now, clearly the Germans cannot defeat the Soviet force directly. The Germans have 24 units in total. If they use their entire force as the payload, then they have to fight the entire Soviet force both ways, and none of them will make the trip. Besides, their most powerful units are fairly slow. Speed 8 for the German vehicles is standard. So we try the minimum payload of 7 units, which is the weakest ones, which won't really be useful in the fight. Specifically, we send 1 armored car, 3 half-tracks, 2 command posts, and a small mortar. The exact payload composition allows some flexibility. And let's have a look at that. Set them up there in the middle first. So that is 2 half-tracks, 3 half-tracks and an armored car, plus 3 units in the half-tracks. But it's going to be some 2 stacks like that. Won't worry about the payloads yet. I won't worry about the loadouts yet. Road movement matters in PanzerBlitz, so you have to stack in particular ways and move units in particular sequences. Imagine that there are no Soviets to start with. So we'll start moving these units and put down markers to indicate how far they get. So starting here, speed 10, the first guy in the trail gets there on turn 1, crosses the entire board on turn 2 because that's a good road, and gets off on turn 2. They all exit because they're all at least as fast. 3, 4, 5 off board, and then turn 6 to there, turn 7 to there, and turn 8, they all exit. Now let's try coming in along the north edge of the map, say from there. So we go turn 1, we get that far, along the road mostly. Turn 2, we don't cross, but almost. Turn 3, they all get off the map. Four, 5, 6, they're off board. 7, 8, 9, 10, they exit. And then let's look at what a southern approach would do. So start maybe there, and we get there on turn 1, there on turn 2, and on turn 3 we exit. 4, 5, 6 off map. Seven, we get back to there. 8, we get back to there. 9, we get to there, and on turn 10, we all get off and complete the mission. And that looks easy enough, right? Especially in the middle. But what the planners fail to consider is that there are Soviet troops here and obstacles, and so it doesn't necessarily work like that. Now let's consider the Soviet setup. Suppose we try the primitive approach, where you just line up your units side by side across the map like that. A line of units perpendicular to the German axis of advance. Well, a competent German will attack on a front of about 10 hexes, and the Soviets will have only a battalion there, and a German battalion will crush a Soviet battalion, and the Germans will have a fighting chance to win the scenario. Many players will play like that, but it misses the point of the scenario. The Soviet objective is not to hold the line, which they can't, but to prevent the Germans from delivering and recovering their payload. Thus they deploy to deny the Germans any corridor of fast advance and to harass them everywhere else. So the next step in this scenario is to examine the placement, consider the placement of obstacles. So let's get rid of all the markers, push the markers off the map. And the first thing we do is place a block. That block is a no-brainer because it negates the road in this hex. The swamp is now impassable to vehicles. Doesn't matter what infantry can do, they can't block the mission. That one counter completely seals off the north quarter of the map. This is now unavailable. And here's another good one. And that links a green hex side line here in, and that second block means that infantry alone can handle the rest of the north half of the map. For the remaining blocks, we can do something like this. One there blocking that road, one there blocking that side of the forest, one there blocking the passage, and another one there blocking the middle. You do this and you will learn some new German swear words. Remember, blocks are permanent and effect stacking, and we still have 4 mines, so let's put them down. One there, one there, one there, and one there. So these are not creating a continuous line. They seem to be almost randomly placed. They're not randomly placed because they are blocking the key points, denying them to the Germans. And you can't get through swamps, and you can't get through forests with vehicles, and you can drive over hills, but very slowly. So these obstacles are very good, very harmful to the German prospects. Now let's recalculate the payload delivery, but we're still ignoring Soviet troops. So we look at getting through this block here. So let me see what's happening. We start some Germans here. We drive them up to that hex. 1 turn. 2 turns onto the block because that's not enough stacking potential to allow the entire German payload through. It'll be turn 3 before the second stack gets onto the block. So it'll be turn 3. And frankly, this route just looks hideous because you have to go into gullies, out of gullies, over hills and stuff. And there's no roads. So turn 3 to get the second stack onto the block. 4 we can get to here somewhere. And then still have to get out of the gully. So 5 and 6 to cross the board and exit the map. 7, 8, 9 off board, 3 turns left, and you cannot return in time, even if all the terrain suddenly disappeared. So what about the mine next to it? Can we drive over the mine? Well, first of all, you have to clear the mine because you're not getting over a mine that's not cleared. Any German engineer trying to clear that mine gets greeted by the howitzer there and dies, in case that's not clear. Now, what about the south edge of the map? We come in somewhere here, and we'll not be going over that. We'll be going over that. So we come in probably here. And if you work this out, it'll be 4 turns to cross the map. An exit. And then 3 turns off map, 5, 6, 7, and you can come back across the map in 4 more turns, which is turn 12, and that's sort of enough. So it's an option maybe. And let's say we come down this axis. All right, so turn 1 to get there, turn 2 onto the block, turn 3, the second stack gets onto the block. Takes 3 turns, 4, 5, 6 to cross the map. 7, 8, 9, you're going to be off board, and you've got 3 turns left. You cannot cross and return in time. So we can see that the Soviets just need a couple of units to delay the map south edge route here by 1 turn, and the entire Soviet force can be used to plug the middle half of the map. This. And is it over now? Did they show you how? Pick up the pieces and go home. And we could just leave it at that. The Germans look at the Soviet setup and immediately resign. Or we could modify this scenario. Such a modification should be minimal, otherwise it's a completely new scenario. Now, what does 3 turns off map even mean? That's 18 minutes. What can you do in 18 minutes? So what we're going to do is we'll extend this scenario length by 3 turns and make it 5 turns off map. Now, let's look at the forces in more detail. We subtract the minimum payload, which is 3 units of passengers and 4 units of small vehicles. We're going to treat an infantry platoon plus its half-track as 1 unit, and an armored car plus a command post plus a half-track as 1 unit. And we're going to lay them out so you can see them. And that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The Germans have 11 strong units. Whereas the Soviets, they have 9 there, 9 infantry companies. 2 of those guns, 2 of those guns, that's 9 plus 4, 13. Plus 2 tanks, so 15 strong units. They have 6 weak units. 15 strong units, 6 weak units, and some transports. Given the low Soviet mobility and the need for them to be somewhat dispersed, this gives the Germans a major long-term advantage, so they could basically attack a small part of the Soviet force at a given time, defeat that, and grind down the Soviet force eventually over a long period of time. But time is limited, and there is a mission, so that's not how it's going to play out. All right, let's finish the Soviet setup. First of all, we'll stick a howitzer there where we said it was going to go. We'll stick the other howitzer there so that we have some fire into this area with a big gun. The two big mortars sit there, and they are heading for the hills on board 2 to set up firing positions so weak German units won't be able to run around with impunity. The anti-tank guns have little value, but can deny a couple hexes to half-tracks and such. Let's drop some anti-tank guns here and there. Well, that's 3 of them placed. These are only 45 millimeters. They are okay for early war, but not for mid-war. But that's what the Soviets have here. Each Speed Zero gun has a dedicated transport assigned. And here's an important thing to know. Never unload 2 Soviet guns in the same hex, because they will never be able to move after that. So we assign those transports to the guns. And the 2 Soviet tanks in the south, they just want to delay the Germans a couple turns. Block that with a wagon. And then basically distribute the infantry and such. That's it. That's the Soviet setup. And that basically guarantees a win for the Soviets, as we'll see later. So note how the Soviet position has holes, like Swiss cheese. Complete hole there, 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 etc. Holes that are big enough to drive a truck through. Except, literally the opposite is true. Trucks will not get through. The Soviets would need a force 3 times as strong to actually hold this line, but that isn't the mission. The mission is to deny the German fast movement, and that is definitely accomplished with this setup. So, for German turn 1, the modified scenario gives the Germans 3 more turns to fight, but only 1 more turn to move the payload. If we estimate 3 to 4 turns for the return trip, plus 5 off map, the payload needs to exit the east map edge by turn 7 at the latest, or the mission fails. The Germans have a lot of possibilities for the optional indirect fire here, but that's a red herring. The errata says that command posts must deploy to call artillery, and the situation is too fluid for that to work. So we're going to use the Vespes as assault guns, glass ones. It's really important to think about mine clearing. There's enough time for that to be a viable option, and we have an engineer. Now, mine clearing is highly luck dependent, and it's too annoying to allow an action that might decide the entire game to be determined by a single die roll. Therefore, I'm using mine clearing rules of work on the minefield for 2 turns. On turn 3, roll the die. 1 to 3, it's cleared. 4 to 6, it's cleared next turn. This keeps the existing average result, but eliminates the skewness. And we will divide the map into different attack plans. And because they literally have to be different, you can't combine them. And I'm going to do it as follows. I use these markers to indicate places where there might be some possibility for the Germans to advance. Lay down some markers. There are 6 places. I'm labeling them 1 to 6. Now, attack plan S, which in German is Südangriff, what we're going to do is seize Hill 126 and push the payload through along the very south edge of the map, or close to it. Now, the advantages of this is that the Soviets have very few troops in this area and can offer little resistance. This minefield can be cleared safely from this hex. Can't really be seen by that gun, so the engineer can just sit there and slowly clear that. That may help later on. It won't help on the trip out, of course. Now, the disadvantages of this is the terrain is really atrocious, imposing severe problems for rapid movement. It's all hills and stuff. The German tanks will really struggle. All the Soviet mobile units are here, which is to say, all 2 of them, and can easily withdraw and keep harassing. You see those big mortars? They can really scuttle this plan by setting up there and there. So much for attack plan S. Attack plan U, which is standing for Ushas. This is very difficult and probably impossible. The main problem is the big howitzer here, which is registered here. And since no resources are countering the gun, the payload basically cannot get through here without first clearing the minefield, because you can't stand there in front of the block without getting shot, and you can't stand there as long as there's a spotter there without getting shot. So you have to sort of clear the minefield. And the engineer will only survive if the Soviet troops here are removed first, and that just takes too long, so basically there's no way through here. Attack plan 135 north, low. That's going through here on the low ground. So the Soviet troops here, yeah, you can eventually be pushed away. Yes, the minefield can eventually be cleared, but the terrain here, hills and gullies and things, is just too terrible, and advancing at 1 hex a turn just isn't going to cut it. Attack plan 135 north, high, where we go right over the north end of the hill. That's fine, but there's another block here and troops, so yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. And then we have attack plan 135 S, south, low, which is coming through here. So we clear the mine, but that will require first removing the Soviet troops in the area, so the engineer can stand somewhere safe and clear the mine. The terrain opens up east of the road junction, but meanwhile the big gun on the hill and the tanks to the south remain a problem. And finally we have attack plan 135 south, high, where we go right through the heart of the Soviet position. So 2 infantry companies, 2 big guns, plus whatever things drift in from the sides. The advantage is that if it's successful, the Soviets lose a big part of their combat power, and the east-west movement becomes a lot easier. But this is a strong position, and if it takes 5 turns to clear it, the payload can't be delivered soon enough, and the mission fails. Now, none of these attack plans have a reasonable chance of success. They are all Hail Mary attempts. And that's really the end of it. Basically, the Soviets are guaranteed to win. There's no point in actually trying to deny reality. But I will do more. And so there is a second part to this scenario video. In the continuation video, I will show a couple moves for each attack plan if you want to see them fail in detail.